Hey y'all, and welcome back to Confederate Shop's YouTube channel. It's a kind of a rainy morning here in Virginia, and I've been thinking about making this video for quite some time because some things need to be said. And if you are a follower of our Facebook page or Instagram or even this YouTube channel, you can go through the comments and you'll most likely stumble on someone who makes the claim that Confederates were a bunch of treasonous traitors and that they committed treason against the United States and the U.S. Constitution. So I wanted to talk about that today. So let's go all the way back to 1776 to 1787 when America was founded, when these colonies committed treason against the crown, because that's essentially that is what the king called men like George Washington, first president, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and Patrick Henry, right? Which some claim that Patrick Henry was really the one who started this whole war. I think Benjamin Franklin had mentioned that in his writings. But all of these men, which might I mention, they were all agrarian Southerners too, were all called treasonous traitors against the crown. That's an important note. And even in their document, the Declaration of Independence, which are really the principles of 1776, the principles upon which the American Union was founded, that document states that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. At the very beginning, they make it clear that our government is a self-determined government as outlined by the people, and that these states are going to be sovereigns. Now, I say that they're going to be sovereigns because we have historical evidence to prove this. When the states came together, it was just assumed, all of the states, it was assumed that they were sovereign entities, that they were sovereigns coming together. Now, there were certain states, Rhode Island, New York, Virginia, all of which, when they ratified the U.S. Constitution, they made it perfectly clear that they were sovereign entities, and I'm paraphrasing, that if the U.S. government did not meet their needs, that if this union did not meet their needs, did not suit them or their people, that they reserved the right to remain sovereign. They put it in clear writing in the very beginning. These states did. I think it's also important to note, too, that there was a book a long time ago that was written by a man named William Rawle. Now, William Rawle was personal friends with George Washington, and George Washington actually commissioned his friend William Rawle to write a book on the U.S. Constitution. That book was A View of the Constitution of the United States. Now, within this book, what makes this book significant about what I'm talking about today is that the principles of 1776, this idea of states being sovereign, or the people that are self-determining their government are sovereign, is talked about in this book. He makes an excellent case and sets a fantastic legal precedent for why the South and the Southern states were sovereign, that why all the states were sovereign, but specifically when referring to the Confederate states in 1861, of them having a legal means of separation from the Union, this was one of their references. And interestingly to note, too, in a lot of the secession documents, one of which, an address of the people of South Carolina by William Rhett, Rhett actually parallels the colonial problems that the colonials were having with King George and the Southern problem that they were having with the Northern-run federal government over taxes and tariffs and abuses, and how the abuse was virtually the same, that their contest was virtually the same. So this book right here, we have this as a historical reprint in our store. You can get it on confederateshop.com. I will say, William Rawle, it's not a page turner. I mean, this is a man, this was written, hundreds of years ago, right? So it's not an easy read per se, but if you love constitutional history, you're a constitutional scholar, it's great. What makes it really great, though, is that it has annotated notes by the Kennedy brothers. The Kennedy brothers were the author of authors of The South Was Right. So this is a real great book. It's a great one to have on your shelf. It's a hardback, and it's a $35 book. Not a bad price for a well-quality book like this. So keep that in mind. That's great too. But back to this idea of secession, I think what also sets a great precedent for what the South did in 1861 is actually what happened around the year 1800 quite a few times in New England. See, people don't realize that parts of New England threatened secession multiple times. I think it was 4 times actually around the year 1800. And what makes it interesting is that not one representative, not one government official within Washington or the South or anywhere in the North did they say, that's illegal, you can't do it, that's treason, y'all are a bunch of traitors if you try to break away from this union. They didn't make any claims about a perpetual union, right? But I think that sets a great precedent too. When it comes to secession, is that the northern states had threatened it multiple times, and not once was it denied them. So going back to one of our greatest heroes too, General Robert E. Lee, it's pretty hard to find dirt on Robert E. Lee, and a lot of the negative claims that historians make today are pretty shallow claims. There's not really a whole lot of historical evidence to base their accusations off of. But I'm not going to get into that necessarily per se today. But one claim that people think has substance is saying, well, yeah, but Robert E. Lee was a treasonous traitor. He committed treason against the U.S. Constitution. I think it's important to note that men back then viewed loyalty to their state and their citizenship, firstly, to their state, as opposed to today we view our citizenship to the United States, to the government in Washington. See, Lee was not looking at his loyalty and his obedience to a government in Washington or to its leaders or a power over there. He was viewing his loyalty to the principles of 1776 and his loyalty really to the U.S. Constitution. Now, the U.S. Constitution does not make any mention of a perpetual union. There is the 10th Amendment, which is a great reference for people who want to support state sovereignty, because the 10th Amendment talks about any right which isn't outlined specifically for the states in the U.S. Constitution, those rights are reserved to the states. And I paraphrase that. You can look up the 10th Amendment for yourself and read that. But the Constitution also talks about levying war against the states. Now, I want you to consider the South, when they seceded in 1861, they were not attempting to overthrow the federal government or the U.S. government. They simply wished to break away and be left alone. As Jefferson Davis, all we ask is to be let alone. They just wanted to be left alone in peace. But with the Fort Sumter incident, obviously, Lincoln had precedent to perpetuate his invasion and gave him a good reason to invade. But the one who levied war against the states was not the Confederacy. It was Abraham Lincoln. And I think this is really one of the things that drove Robert E. Lee away from the offer of him commanding the entire Union Army. It was because Lincoln had asked him to take an invading army down through Virginia, past Virginia, to his sister states, southern states. And he was not willing to do that. He felt that it was unconstitutional. His loyalties lied with his family and Virginia. And he can't put his sword against his own family and his own state. So I think these are all interesting points. Take them for what you will, and hopefully you got something from them. But you can also get a view of the Constitution in our library. Consider that. And another book that I have talked about before, and it's just so fantastic. I love this little book. And it is a little book. It's only 30 pages. It's called Defend Dixie, A Better Narrative for Confederate Heritage. All of the materials in this book are cited, which is very important today with the historical academic climate. Everybody screams about, where's your citations and sources? What are your sources? This book is sourced. Also, all of my essays that I am writing now on the My Two Cents section are all cited and referenced, and are going to have sources there at the very bottom for people who want to go a little deeper into the history. But what makes this little book special is that at the very end, it has about a dozen claims that we hear most often from our opposition against Confederate heritage. Claims like Alexander Stephens' cornerstone speech and white supremacy, it addresses that. It addresses the secession documents. It addresses what I talked about today, that secession was treason, that Robert E. Lee was a traitor. So you need to have this little booklet on your shelf. It's only $6, so get yourself one today. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I actually have the day off today, and a good friend of mine's coming over, and we're going to shoot today, do some target practice. Hopefully the rain stops at around 10, and we could do that. But thank you all so much for your support and for following this YouTube channel and for purchasing the books on our website. So y'all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.